Hi and welcome to the Oh Sew Gecko channel. In today's tutorial we're going to be filming the Malaga Mighty Wallet. So what is the Malaga Mighty Wallet? Well, it's that time of year, the sun is shining, it's really hot, and hopefully you're off on your travels, and for that you're going to need a special type of wallet that you can just keep everything in. And so here it is. This is the Malaga Mighty Wallet. Now you will see from the outside, it's quite a large size. If I can put my hand here, you'll see it's just a little bigger than my hand, just a little bit longer. But width-wise, again, maybe a little bit deeper. You'll see it's got an elasticated strap on the outside. You do actually have a choice with this pattern if you can have an elasticated strap, or you can choose to use two magnetic snaps in place of that if you prefer. Then my wallet I've made out of cork. This is a raw edge project, so it does mean that you will need to use a non-fraying fabric. So something like cork or vinyl, maybe leather, any of those things will work. Let's open this up. So as you can see, it's quite large. This is just the flap area. If you wanted, you could put some Decaville light or something in here to make it a little bit stronger. I've left mine out because my cork is quite thick, so I'm quite happy with mine, but you could put some Decaville light or something in there just to firm that up a little bit. And here inside you'll see we've got two sets of card slots and two sets of zipped pockets. So let's start with this one at the top. So you'll see, let's open this up. So it's a nice, let's move that flap out of the way. It's a nice deep pocket. So you can put my hand in there. That's quite nice and deep. Keep all your coins in or keys or whatever you want to keep in there. There's also then a slip pocket here, which is big enough if you wanted to put passports in. You can see that's quite a good size, more than big enough for a passport. My mobile phone, which is let me get this right, it's a Samsung Galaxy S22, just the normal size one, that will also fit in there. Okay, so you can fit your mobile phone in this pocket if it's one of the slightly smaller ones. Now, I have my daughter's mobile phone here that I've borrowed. You can see it's got Hello Kitty and all sorts of things on here. Her phone is somewhat larger than mine. It does still fit. She does have a very bulky case on it, but it will fit in there. And it is one of the larger size Samsung phones. I want to say it's an A55 or something. I might be wrong. I might put it on the screen if I figure it out. I would have a look, but the battery's flat. No surprise there, teenagers. So, slip pocket there, which will fit a mobile phone in. Then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 card slots, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you can fit lots and lots of cards in. Then on the bottom, we've got a repeat of what we've got here. So again, we've got another zip pocket. Really deep, exactly the same. We've got another slip pocket, and again we've got 8 card slots, which is lots and lots of card slots to be able to put things in. Business cards, all kinds of things. That's not everything though. I told you that if you went on holiday, you'd be able to fit everything in here, and right now you're looking at me going, Lisa, so I can put my mobile phone in there and I can probably get my passport in there. But that's not everything, because at the side we've got 2 large slip pockets, which are the width of the entire wallet. That means that if you've got lots of passports like this, they can actually fit in the pocket quite happily, and they do go down quite far. You can see, so there's no chance of them falling out, there's no chance of you losing anything. It'll be absolutely fine. So at the moment, that's 3 passports I've put into there, but then we've got another one here. Now, this particular mobile phone belongs to my husband. Now, this one is a Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra, and it has one of these giant covers on it. You can see it's got the big bulky bit at the back, and it's, you know, one of those ones that if you drop it and it falls on the floor, it doesn't break. So it's quite a hard case, but this will also fit quite happily in that pocket. So passports, mobile phone, cards. Why do I need 2 zip pockets? Well, if you're anything like me and you're in the airport and you want a coffee and it's my local currencies all muddled up with my currency from my hometown or whatever, then I've got 2 places to keep everything separate. I don't have to worry about things getting mixed up and losing everything in the process. Everything fits in and it closes up quite nicely. Mobile phones, passports, boarding passes, tickets, keys, you name it, I can fit it in here. If you wanted to, you could add some little tabs to the side and then make it into a crossbody bag. One of the pattern testers has actually done that and it did work quite well. So you could make it into a crossbody if you wanted to. If while you're watching you are enjoying this video, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. Let's start sewing this Malaga Mighty Wallet. So starting, we've got pattern piece 1. So you've got A and B, which you'll need to stick together. And I've got a lining and an outer fabric. Obviously both of these are cork. So I'm going to use this one for my outer and this one for my lining. Pattern piece 2 is the card backing. So you need 2 non-fraying fabric for these, and I'm going to use this rustic cork for mine. Pattern piece 3 is the interior backing panel. Again, 2 non-fraying fabric. So those are mine there, again with the rustic cork. Pattern piece 4 is the card slot rear. So I've got 2 of those in the navy cork, which matches my outer. Pattern piece 5 is the card slots middle and front. So pattern piece 4 is the rear card slot, which is a different size to the front one in the middle. And I've got 8 of these. So here I've got 2 in the rustic, 2 in the navy, and I've got 4 in my patterned cork. So we've got pattern piece 6, which is the zip tabs, and I've got 4 of those in a non-fraying fabric. So in the pattern instructions, you've got a choice of either using magnetic snaps or elastic for the closure for your wallet. For today, I'm going to be using the elastic. You're also going to need 2 number 3 zippers with pulls. So starting off, especially because I'm using cork, I'm going to need to seal the edges of my cork fabric. So I'm going to do this by using a lighter to burn all the edges, and then I'm going to go around with my fabric glue. This is an Aptly textile glue. You can use any fabric glue so long as it's a permanent one. This one is washable, so obviously means it's somewhat waterproof. So I'm going to use this around all the edges of all of my pattern pieces, just to make sure they're sealed before I start. If you're using edge coat, you might want to edge coat as you go along. So I'll tell you at different points where you can do that. Alternatively, you can start from the beginning, edge coat everything. If you're not a confident sewer, you might need to reapply the fabric glue or the edge coat as you go along and burn the edges as you go along. It really depends on how confident you are at sewing. So starting with one of my pattern piece 4, I'm going to take my lighter. I'm just going to burn off edges just to make sure they're sealed. Just run along it with a lighter. Cork won't burn. It's the fabric backing that burns. It's absolutely fine. Now that I've done that, I'm going to take my fabric glue or your edge coat, whatever you're using. I'm just going to dab a little along the length. And I'm going to use this, my rolling tool. This is a leather edge roller. And what it does is it helps you to apply the glue along the length. So I'm going to do that to all of my pattern pieces. So I'm going to start with preparing my zips. I put one to one side. And let's put this zipper pull on. So open this the right side down, the other side in. You hear that click, put it down, pull that across. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that my zipper pull is in the middle. And using the measurements in the pattern instructions, I'm going to measure a distance from the centre of the zip to the outside. So here's my 2 marks that I've made. I'm going to take one of my zipper tabs, right side down, and I'm going to lay it lining up with the mark that I've just made. And the zipper tab is going this side of the line and not this side. Okay. So we'll clip that in place, and then we'll do the same with the other one. And I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch across this line here, okay, with a 3mm or 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to do it on this side, and then the same over here on this side. There we go. So that's our zipper tab sewn on. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to flip this zipper tab back into place, and I'm going to top stitch across here with a 3mm stitch length, 3mm or an 1/8 of an inch in from the edge, and I'm going to do that on both sides. There we are. So that's stitched down on both ends. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut back the zipper tape. I'm going to leave about 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch behind, just for a little bit extra security. And then using my rotary cutter, I'm going to trim down the edges so as they are the same width as the zipper. And I'm going to check that my zipper tape now measures the correct measurement, which is in the pattern instructions. That's my zipper completed. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the other one. So we're going to find the midpoints of our pattern pieces 2, 4 and 5. And then when we've done that, we're going to top stitch across the top of our pattern piece 4s and our pattern piece 5s. So for now we've put our pattern piece 2s to one side. So I've got the 2 pattern piece 4 and I've got 8 pattern piece 5. So we're going to put these ones over to one side and we're just going to start with these. I've got 1 pattern piece 4 and 4 pattern piece 5. Using the pattern instructions, I'm going to mark lines on my pattern piece 4 and 3 of my pattern piece 5. So I'm going to take, let's have a look, which one do I want to be on the front? I think I want this one to be on the front. So I'm going to move that over to one side. And these ones, I'm going to make the marks that are in the pattern instructions. So I'm going to take my pattern piece 4 and 1 of my pattern piece 5. And I'm going to line up the top edge of the pattern piece 5 with the marks that I've made on the pattern piece 4 beneath. I'm going to clip that in place. So I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch across the bottom edge of the pattern piece 5 with a 3mm stitch length. That's 2mm or a 1/16 of an inch from the bottom edge. There we go. So that's stitched in place. And I'm going to take the next one. And again, I'm going to line up the top edge with marks on the pattern piece 5 below, making sure that my centre points are lined up. I'll take that across to the sewing machine, and again I'm going to stitch across the bottom edge with a 2mm or 1/16 of an inch seam allowance. There we go, it's stitched across here. I'm going to take the last one and again line it up with the marks, clip that in place and stitch across the bottom. Okay, so we've got our 1, 2, 3 pattern piece 5s attached, stitched across the bottom. I'm going to start on the last one. Now, if you have a label and you want to attach it to the inside to your card slots, now is the time to do it. So we've got our centre line marked here. We're going to be stitching on this line across the bottom and this side. So if you want to attach a label, you've got a space here where you can do it, or obviously you can do it on this side. So I'm going to take my glue for my label. I'm going to take that to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch around all 4 sides. I'm going to leave the tails long so I can pull them through to the back, knot them, and then seal that off that way. So now we're going to take our last pattern piece 4. Again, we're going to line it up with the lines on the pattern piece 5 below, keeping it centered. Clip that in place. I'm going to top stitch across the bottom edge of the last pattern piece 5, and when I've done that, I'm going to stitch up the center of all of the card slots, so from this bottom edge here all the way up to the very top, meeting up with our top stitching line on the pattern piece 4, which is the one at the back. And then I'm going to back stitch really well at each of the card slots, just for a little bit of extra security, because those will be under a bit of stress when you're putting your cards in and out. There, so that's stitched across the bottom edge and up the center. So now we can see our card slot starting to take shape. Now, if you need to, you can now trim up the edges here. You can see that my edges are ever so slightly misaligned. See, I've got a little bit here. That's because my rustic cork especially is quite stretchy. So trim up any edges now, and then if you need to, reapply your fabric glue to the edges to seal it, or you can edge coat across here now. There we are, so that's mine all trimmed up. When you're trimming up, be careful not to trim off this bottom edge. You'll see it is overhanging slightly. That is correct. Don't trim that bit off. Okay, so we'll put that over to one side, and we're going to do exactly the same thing with the other ones. So here are my 2 card slot panels completed. I've trimmed down the sides and I've applied more of my fabric glue to seal those edges. I haven't trimmed off this bottom seam allowance here. I'll put one of these to the side. I'm going to bring one of my pattern piece 2 pieces. I'm going to use the pattern piece, and I'm going to use the lines on here to mark on my pattern piece 2. Taking one of my panels from here, I'm going to line up the centre marks, and also I'm going to line up the top edge of my card panel here with the marks that I've just made. Making sure it's centred, you'll see that you've got an extra 2-3 millimeters, 1/16 of an inch either side. That's correct. Let's make sure that's centred. And we'll clip that in place. So now the bottom edge from our card slots lines up correctly with the bottom edge of our pattern piece 2, but we've got a small gap either side. So I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine. First of all, I'm going to stitch across this bottom edge. I'm going to stitch 2-3 millimeters, 1/16 of an inch away from this bottom edge here, across. Then when I've done that, starting at the bottom and working my way up, I'm going to back stitch well here, come all the way up the sides, back stitching really well every time I go over one of these card slots. And I'm going to do that on both sides. When I've done that on this one, I'm going to do exactly the same with the other. There's our completed card slot panels. So we've got our space in the back which fits a mobile phone, and we've got our card slots. You might want to check now, just make sure that your cards fit in your card slots, make sure there's no problems. You can, if you want, I stitched across the bottom and then did the sides. If you want, you can of course stitch down the side across the bottom and back up the other side. The reason that I didn't do that is because, as you saw earlier, my rustic cork especially is quite stretchy. So if I do that, it tends to move quite a lot. So it's easier for me to stitch everything in individual pieces, but you can, of course, just stitch right the way around. So we've got our 2 card slot panels, and I'm bringing back our zipper tape. So let's move one of these out of the way. So you'll see that I've still got my center point marked, and I've got my center point here marked to the left when closed. So that's right open, left closed. Okay, really doesn't matter which way around you do it, but I would suggest that whichever way you decide, make sure that you sew both the same way around. We're going to put the card panel right side up, zipper tape right side down on top. Just move this zipper pull out of the way a little, matching up the center points. Okay, so make sure those are centered, and we're going to clip that in place right the way along. I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch across 4mm or 3/16 of an inch from the edge. Make sure while you're stitching to move your zipper pull out of the way. We don't want to be sewing over that. Okay, so that's stitched in place, which hopefully you can see. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this up, making sure that my seam allowance here goes behind the panel. Okay. Okay, like that. And then I'm going to top stitch across this pattern piece 2 panel all the way from one side right the way to the other, keeping that seam allowance folded down behind, which will hold it in place and make sure that your zipper stays upright nice and neatly. So we're bringing back our pattern piece 3, which is the interior back panel, our 2 of those, and we've still got our 2 card slot panels. So I'm going to put one of these pattern piece 3 over to one side, and then using the marks on the pattern piece, these ones here, not these ones, we're going to use these ones here, I'm going to make marks on my pattern piece 3. Now this is the top of my pattern piece 3 and this is the bottom. Okay. So I'm going to take my card slot panel and I'm going to flip it. So my pattern piece 3 is right side up. I'm going to put my card slot panel right side down, and I'm going to line up the top edge of the zipper tape with those 2 lines that I've just made. So it's going this way. So don't make the mistake and put it this way up. Okay, it's going this way. So again, top, bottom of pattern piece 3, card slot panel, right side down, top edge of the zipper tape, lining up with the marks that we've just made, and also lining it up centrally. So again, now you'll notice we've got a small gap either side. That is correct. Okay, we need that small gap either side. So I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch across here with a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then when I've done that, I'm going to stitch again with a 4mm or 3/16 of an inch seam allowance as well, just to give a little bit of extra security on there. There we go, that's stitched in place. What we're now going to do is we're going to flip down our card slot panel, close the zipper, but it makes it a little bit easier. And then we're going to line up our card slot panel, making sure it's nice and straight. And we should have a small gap at the bottom of either 2-3mm, 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so just make sure that's even on both sides, and then clip into place. Once you've clipped, you may need to readjust a little Just check that you're happy with the space around the sides. Now at the sewing machine, I'm going to start on my zipper tab up here. I'm going to sew down the side, across the bottom and back up the other side. Now I'm sewing on this pattern piece 2 here. Okay, so I'm not sewing on the card slots, I'm sewing on this small edge that we've got left here. So down the side, across the bottom, so across the blue that we sewed before, back up this side again, sewing on this pattern piece 2 here, attaching it to the pattern piece 3. And then when I've done that, I'm going to top stitch carefully across the top of both of these zipper tabs just to make sure that those are held down. Now what we're going to do is we're going to attach the other panel. So bring this one back. Bring back my pattern piece, or you can use the pattern instructions. I'm going to use this to make my marks on the top. So, same as before, right side up, right side down. This time I'm lining up the edge of my zipper tape with the marks at the top here. So let me move this down a little bit. So you'll see that when we do this, put my zipper pull in the middle. When we do this, we're lining it up centrally and lining up the top edge with these 2 marks. So it means that my panel, my card panel, is laying on my table. It's not this way up, okay? We don't want it laying on top of here. Okay, we want it flipped around. So as the main part of our card panel is actually lying above the pattern piece 3. And I'm going to clip that in place. Now, if you're finding that a little bit awkward, you could use a little bit of glue, maybe a very thin piece of double-sided tape, but you'll need to be careful that it's not left overhanging once you flip it down. Okay, so I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine and do exactly the same as we did with this one. I'm going to sew with a 6mm or 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to do another row of stitching as well, just to make sure that it's extra secure. So that's stitched on here. Now what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to flip this down, same as before, and I'm going to line up the bottom edge with the 2 marks that we made earlier, and obviously keeping it central. Okay, and I've done that, and clip that in place. So same as we did with the bottom panel, I'm going to stitch down the side, across the bottom, back up the other side, making sure that I'm sewing on this pattern piece 2 here. Okay, so come down the side, across the bottom, back up the other side, and then I'm going to stitch across the top of the 2 zipper tabs just to make sure that those stay in place. Okay, so we're bringing back the other pattern piece 3. And what we're going to do, I'll flip this over, I'm going to place them wrong sides together. Okay. Now, if you want, you can use some double-sided tape or some glue to hold these in place. You will need to avoid this centre and around the outer edges because we're going to be stitching in those places. But you can certainly add some double-sided tape or some glue to these 2 spaces here. Make sure that you line up all the corners, all the edges, right the way around. Okay. So now you need to decide which side you want your side slip pockets to open on. So I want mine to open on this side on the right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stitch down this right side, starting at the top here, all the way down to the bottom edge.
and I will be sewing on the pattern piece 3. So not on the pattern piece 2 like we did before. Now I'm stitching on the 2 pattern piece 3 pieces from top to bottom. When I've done that, I'm then going to come across and I'm going to stitch across the center on both sides here, stitching that down in place. So unfortunately I forgot to hit record, but we've stitched all the way down this right side, and I've stitched a box around the center. Now if you want your side pockets to open on the left side, you, instead of stitching down the right side, you would have stitched down the left side and then done a box around the center. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim up any uneven edges. Mine's ever so slightly different. I'm going to trim up that very fine overhang there. And when I've done that, I'm going to use my fabric glue and I'm going to seal all of the edges all the way around the pattern piece 3s. So putting our card slot panel to one side and bringing back the 2 pattern piece 1. Now this is my outer and this is my lining. So for the moment I'm going to put my outer over to one side. I'm just going to start working on the lining. So bringing in my pattern piece, you'll see there are marks on the pattern piece, or the measurements are in the pattern instructions. So I'm just going to turn this over, line this up top and bottom, and I'm going to transfer these lines onto the back of my pattern piece 1 lining. Taking my elastic, I'm going to mark a line 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters in from each end. Now remember, this is the top, this is the bottom. Don't get your top and bottom confused, okay? Because this is not marked halfway, it is in the lower half. So if you get it upside down, then in the end, your elastic strap will be in the wrong place. So taking my elastic, I'm going to line up the mark that I made on the elastic with the outer edge of the pattern piece and lining up the bottom edge of the elastic with the line that I've marked. Okay, so it's going to go this side of the line. So not in the middle, not below it, it's going above, lining up this line with the edge and the bottom line of my elastic with the line that I've made. Now I'm going to take this across to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew a box around here, probably with a cross in it, to hold that elastic in place. There we are, so that's stitched on in place. Now, you can do this one of 2 ways. You can bring this over and flip round. Personally, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to take this round the back, lining it up carefully. I'm again going to line up the mark that I've made on the elastic with the edge of the pattern piece 1 and the bottom edge lining up with the marked line. Now don't pull it too tight and clip that in place. So when you come to sew this, you have to make sure that you're not catching this underneath. We don't want to sew through and catch this on the other side. So I'm now going to flip this through. Slightly easier way of doing it. So now holding it out of the way, again, I'm going to sew a box around all 4 sides on here, making sure not to catch this when I'm stitching. There we are, so that's stitched in place. And you can just see on the other side through the pattern. So again, making sure that you've got your pattern piece the right side up. So for me, this is the top and this is the bottom. Okay, I'm going to flip this over. I'm bringing back my card slot panel. I'm going to line it up centrally, keeping it 2 or 3 millimeters, so 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch from the bottom edge, keeping it centered. I'm going to clip that in place. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine. I've got my right side as the side I want to open. So for this, I'm going to sew across the bottom edge, up one side and across the top, back stitching really, really well at the beginning and the end. If you want your slots to open on the left side, and so you've top stitched on the left, obviously I top stitched the right. If you've top stitched the left, you're going to do the opposite. So you're going to start at the top here, come round down the side and across the bottom. You don't want to sew closed your side panel. Okay, so whichever side it is that you're doing, make sure you don't sew on that side. There we go. So I've started at the bottom, stitched all the way around the side, up here and across the top. And I've backstitched really, really well at the beginning and the end because obviously that's going to be under quite a bit of stress. Okay, so you'll see I've stitched across the centre here. I actually got a little bit carried away with myself and I shouldn't have stitched these centre lines yet. So what you should have at the moment is your 1, 2, 3 sides stitched down and nothing else. Should just be those. And obviously your 1, 2 stitch lines, but not these centre ones. Okay, so if it looks a little odd, I apologise. So I'm going to flip this over. You can see this is where I've stitched, which I shouldn't have done. This shouldn't be here at the moment. So if yours doesn't have this bit, that's okay, it shouldn't. I'm going to take some double-sided tape. You don't have to use double-sided tape if you don't want to, it's absolutely fine. I'm going to use double-sided tape because I feel that it makes things slightly easier. Don't make it too long. We don't want to go too close to the edges. Obviously that's where we're going to be stitching. Okay, not here and not here because we'll be stitching in both of those places and obviously right the way around the edge as well. So I'm going to have to keep this out of the way. So I'm just going to flip my elastic over to the other side for the moment. And I'm going to put these two wrong sides together. Okay. So we'll be able to see the pretty side of both. Now we need to line this up as best we can. Remember, we can trim down a little bit, but if you've used the elastic, it will limit you. So try and get this lined up as best you can. So now, because I've used the elastic, I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch around all 4 sides. If you've used the magnetic snaps, you're going to want to stitch down one side across the bottom and back up the other side, but leave the top open so as you're able to add the other half of your magnetic snap. Okay. If you're stitching around the elastic, you can stitch across this top edge here of the elastic to hold it in place. That's absolutely fine. It will just give it a little bit of extra security. Then when I've done that, that's when I then need to stitch this center box. So for the purposes of this video, I'm actually going to go over this box. There we go. So you can see that I've stitched across here. You can see it from the back. It just helps where the wallet needs to fold. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing here at the top. Remembering, if you've got to do a magnetic snap, put your magnetic snap on. So using the pattern instructions, I'm going to measure a distance up, and then again I'm going to stitch a box with another box inside and then a line down through the center, and that will just give my wallet that little bit extra structure for the fold here. And so there we are, that's stitched across here. Now all I've got left to do is to trim up the edges, burn them around to seal them, and then seal it with some fabric glue or some edge coat if that's what you're using.